We are live.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Barbershop, where you're here to get a fresh cut, fresh information, and be able to hear some of the experts in the field of fatherhood and work around New York City. As always, I want to start off with introducing my guest host. Right now, we have one that's going to be on his way in, but I have Mike Bobbitt here with me. Mike, how you doing so far?
I'm good. Can you hear me, Scott?
Yes, I can.
All right, good. My computer is acting crazy right now. I'm getting one of those spinning wheels of death, and I was hoping I was not on mute. So thank goodness I'm not on mute. But it's good to be back in the barbershop. Good to see you, Scott.
Great. So people in Barbershop, we have a great cast of panelists today. Actually, I see some more just came on, which is even greater. So I want to take time right now and talk about our topic and talking about being resilient. With today's things that are going on in our day-to-day lives and around the world, we had to take a pause because this month is about suicide and a lot of things that are going on. And we want to take a pause, but also talk about our resiliency, especially here in New York. I just think back a couple of weeks ago, 9/11. It was the 20th anniversary of 9/11, and New Yorkers, we are so resilient. We've dealt with the pandemic and we've been resilient. We've dealt with many political things going on and we've been resilient. So we're going to have some guests on to talk about different things about being resilient in these days and time right now. And we have some great experts on right now. So first, I want to bring on one of our partners who's been in the barbershop in the past. I want to talk to and introduce Dr. Mcrae. How you doing, Dr. Mcrae?
Doing really well.
So introduce yourself again to the new people who are on or who's happened to be a part of us.
Sure. My name is Michael Mcrae. I am a clinical psychologist by training, and I am the assistant commissioner for the Bureau of Health Promotion for Justice Impacted Populations at the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Again, that's the Bureau of Health Promotion for Justice Impacted Populations, and we're focused mostly on kind of how to promote and protect the health of individuals who are involved and impacted by the criminal legal system, with specifically around mental health and substance use and social needs as well.
Thank you. Next, I want to introduce Dan. Dan, want to bring you on?
Thanks for having me at the barbershop. My name is Dan Schatz. I'm an addiction medicine provider. I work at the public health system, so health and hospital. And I do clinical work and I do administrative over the whole system, overseeing kind of addiction initiatives. And then I also work at the Department of Health, where I'm in the commissioner's office. And I've been working on this wonderful project around loneliness, which is I got to see translating all the way from the patient to the healthcare system and to the community. So I'm really glad to be here amongst all these other great individuals, and look forward to this discussion.
Great, thank you very much. And I see I have two superstars on that I'm going to bring on. Jeannie, how you doing? You want to introduce yourself?
I'm doing well. My name is Jeannie Rogers. I'm here, and I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. And in half of my life, I'm a singer-songwriter. And in the other half of my life, I'm an adult and child psychiatrist. And those two things in recent years for me have really fed each other because they obviously inform each other. I write music to both express the emotions that come up for me in the work that I do, but also to communicate about these mental health issues that are so universal in a way that will hopefully move people and help people talk to each other, communicate to each other. And I'm just glad to be doing that here tonight.
Thank you. And a great friend of mine from way back in my PAL days, Olympian, a star in her own right, introducing our Wendy Hilliard. How you doing, Wendy?
I'm great, Scott. So glad to be here with you all.
So tell us about yourself, Wendy, because I know we have 2 hours and you can't take the whole 2 hours just about your accomplishments, but tell us a little bit about your foundation and the things you're doing with women and these young girls with gymnastics. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, certainly, yeah. So I am a former rhythmic gymnast. I was the first Black to compete for the U.S. in rhythmic gymnastics on the national team, and stayed on the national team for 9 years, and was a coach and coached an Olympian in '96. Then I started my gymnastics foundation, which has provided free and low cost gymnastics for urban youth in Harlem primarily, but also in Detroit for the last 25 years. But also during my time as an athlete, I was the athlete representative to the board. So I kind of represented all athlete issues. I was president of the Women's Sports Foundation and work with thousands of young girls now. And gymnastics, of course, has been in the headlines for the last few years, but especially recently, and especially since the Olympics, to kind of focus on, even though these athletes are amazing in their work, mental struggles are real. And that's coming to light that even if you look strong and do fantastic feats, the mental health is extremely important. So I'm really glad to be here to discuss that today.
Thank you, Wendy. And back to our barbershop once again, our main man who does all this work with suicide prevention and all things with mental health. And I know, listen, I looked at all his title takes up 1 page of information before he even gets to the information that he has to tell you, just all the things that he's in charge of. I want to introduce our brother, Brett Scudder. Hey, Brett, love you, man.
Hey, beautiful people, beautiful people. Where's the energy in this room? Come on, where's the energy? Come on, we need that energy. Come on, come on. We're talking about some topics here, but we got to bring that energy. Lift it up, lift it up. Yeah, thank you. Thank you to Scott, to Mike, and to Jerry, and all of you for putting this together, for having me here, and just continuing to raise awareness on this topic. I'm a suicide attempt survivor. I live with my suicidality every day. I've been in and out of the healthcare system and everything in between that. And so my work and starting my own foundation and the Suicide Institute is to bring more real world experience of what it's like to be suicidal, living in a suicidal mind, understanding a suicidal mind, and how so many different things in our life can get someone to that state that sometimes we don't even think about. And so for me, as Scott said, I wear many hats because I get pulled into so many different things to focus on this topic, to bring the real human experience of what I've lived through, what I've been through, and being in the systems into the conversation. So I'm happy to be here, looking forward to being a part of the conversation and just raising the energy, raising that energy. Come on, guys, we got to raise the energy. Thank you.
Thanks, Brett. I'm going to pass it up now to Mike. Mike, I'm going to let you introduce your guest.
Thank you. I can think of no better time than when we're focusing on resiliency to have my computer crash and have to jump on by phone. So we make it happen in the barbershop. I'll get the background going as soon as I can. Yes, so we have some other fine guests, and hello to everyone who's been introduced. Jeannie may have mentioned this. We've known each other for a while, and I was listening as she was talking to our audience about striking that balance between her professional work in therapy and her emerging professional work as a musician. She's being very modest though, but she shared with me, and we want to make a joyful noise about the fact that one of her songs was used by MTV Networks as they celebrated their mental health campaigns earlier this year. And Jeannie has made some introductions to DYCD, and we're very pleased to have Daly Baker from the social impact area at Viacom and MTV Networks. Daly, welcome to your first Barbershop Talks.
Hello, and thank you so much for having me. So my name is Daly Baker. I'm based in New York City, and I am on the MTV Entertainment Group Social Impact team. And our mission is to use our network superpowers for good. So my team right now, we focus on civic engagement, mental health, social justice, racial justice issue areas. And right now we're doing a lot of work in the intersections of race, culture, identity, and mental health. So it is a pleasure to be here, and I'm very excited for the conversation.
To have you aboard, Daly. I hope this will be the first of ongoing relationship over time with MTV and Viacom. Welcome back to the Barbershop, Lisa Lavelle. Some of these really interesting and nuanced issues where we're talking about relationships, we've leaned on Lisa as a professional therapist. Lisa and I go way, way back. I'm glad that she's making the time to help New Yorkers and our wider audience think about these issues. So Lisa, welcome back. Please reintroduce yourself to the Barbershop.
Hello, everyone. And I first want to thank Scott, Mike, and Jerry for having me back. It's good to be here. My name is Lisa Lavelle, and I'm a psychotherapist based in New York City with a specialty in family and couples therapy. And when I thought about the topic of tonight's show, staying mentally resilient, the impact that these times have had on marriages, on relationships, on parent-child relationships has been tremendous. And I'm putting that mildly when I say that. So I really look forward to engaging in a spirited conversation with tonight's panel. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
All right, did we get it for now? I know we're gonna have one or two guests pop in as we go, but I think we got everyone who's with us right now. And maybe Jerry wants to say hello if he didn't get a chance to do that just yet.
No, definitely just excited for the conversation. There's nothing like to have a great conversation in your router crash. So with that said, I'm just excited. We have some amazing mental stylists that are coming back to the barbershop. So I'm excited about the gems that they're going to drop. And I just can't wait to listen in and be able to share that to everyone out there. So again, Cherry Hippolyte, DYCD, in-house mental health ambassador and champion. Scott, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Jerry. And once again, so we're going to go ahead and dive right in. So our topic, the title of our topic is, emotional, social, and mental resiliency. Do you understand it, and things that we're going to talk about? So we want to jump in right there. So I'm just throwing out to the panel this: when you saw the title and that we asked you to come on, what's the first thing that hit you? And that said, you know what, I want to be part of this kind of conversation. And which one of those topics, words, whatever, resiliency, whatever, what is it that drew you in and says, you know what, I got something to say? Anybody, you're gonna jump in, I can start just pointing people out.
I'll start out. So for me, what was very appealing to me was that in my background, I focused and kind of specialized in trauma and kind of how trauma looks over the course of the lifespan, and then looking at kind of racial trauma as kind of an additive piece to that. So, lots of folks that I work with, kind of how I think about the work we do is around kind of a trauma and resilience informed approach. I think oftentimes we get focused and stuck on the kind of trauma and what happened. And I kind of wanted to move to that place where we're thinking about kind of a healing space and kind of using resilience to heal. So to me, I'm really interested in kind of how we can get together some very kind of concrete strategies on how to heal from trauma. And I look at a lot of my work through kind of, like I said, a racial equity and social justice lens.
So I want to jump over to Dan. So Dan, when he talks about trauma, how does trauma play into your work? Because you do a lot about loneliness and things of that nature. How does that play into your work?
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you. Trauma is everything. It's 50% of New Yorkers experience one childhood trauma. And what's unfortunate is it tends to cluster. So if you have one trauma, you're more likely to have two. If you have two, you're more likely to have three. And each additional trauma that you experience during your childhood, that's not up to you, increases your risk of going on to substance use, which is my field. And to your first question, as far as what drew me into this conversation, resiliency is really, and belonging is really what I think about. I continue to be rooted in clinical care, and I talk to my patients all the time. And what I always talk to my patients is, I tended to see that they started staying around in my office a little bit longer and just wanted to talk a little bit more. And I asked, do you have other people that you talk to? And turns out person after person, it's really common. Over 60% of New Yorkers say that they're lonely at some point. And I ask, who's your community? And when they struggle to hear about that, that's what I'm going to turn my attention to. This is having a community, a sense of belonging contributes to this resiliency. And that's how we can combat trauma and also the loneliness at the same time. So the work that you're working on, Dr. Mcrae, is incredible. And the connection is deep.
So Lisa, how does that play into family dynamics? Because you just said a key word about your village. But your immediate village is your family. And I just heard you say that during this time, family has gone through a lot of things with trauma and trying to be resilient at that time. So in your work, how's that playing out?
Absolutely. I think to just piggyback on what Dan is saying, I think what I see as a family therapist is generational trauma. You're talking about trauma from great grandparents, grandparents, parents, that is then sort of inherited both horizontally and vertically by children. I think race and slavery and racism is, I think, the most obvious example of that we're talking about today. And then I think you see what trauma looks like in the context of a relationship. And I think then we're talking about, it could be issues of psychological trauma, which could look like depression or anxiety. It could show up as abuse in a relationship. It could show up as underfunctioning in a relationship or not performing to your ability in a school. So I think trauma has a huge generational impact. In the same way, our community, I think, can also be a source of pain, but also a source of healing. So I definitely echo Dan's sentiments, especially in the context of family and couples therapy.
I want to jump over to Wendy now, because she said a key thing about performing. And sometimes I know in performance, especially as a former athlete, and I know you're a former athlete, how does that play into this also, that things that we're going to right now? And I know that definitely the world of gymnastics has really been highlighted right now because of the trauma that a lot of the young ladies have gone through with Dr. I can't think of his name right now.
Yes, sir.
And yeah, and so, and just being traumatized by that, and then hearing them testify in Congress that no one heard them, no one listened to them, no one went to pick up their fight and move it. So how does that playing out, being an athlete and being traumatized and then trying to perform at your peak, especially during the Olympics that just happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's really compounded. I mean, what Dan was talking about was very important, is having someone to talk to. What happened a lot in gymnastics is that you're kind of taught to, especially these girls were pretty young, between 12 and 16, most of them, and gymnasts are not known. They're known for expressing on the floor exercise or on the balance beam, but not verbally speaking to something. They're used to get that type of discipline to do gymnastics well requires a certain amount of focus and not really expressing yourself. So it was a combination of a lot of things, that they were very young. Some of them, I mean, it's hard to imagine when you talk about the trauma, realizing what it was, not having someone to talk to, in a sense, because you would be looked at as not being strong. And so keeping this under wraps for so long is what the saddest part was, right? And then when it came out, people weren't really listening to them and seeing what it was. So it's very impactful when you talk about trauma. And I thought as an athlete, and then again as a coach, that sports could really heal a lot of things. But when trauma's there, it just doesn't. It just maybe delays it coming out because you have all this other strength, but it's always there and it's going to come out at one point. When you talk about having community in the world of sports, it's like our coaches, our teammates are very, very important. Parents, of course, are very important. But as many of you know, sometimes it's very difficult to speak about things that are done to you. I mean, that's the first part. And so acknowledging that in the world of gymnastics, what we're all feeling, and the thing that's come out now, the most important thing I think is that they have a voice. No longer will they have to be so quiet. When people are talking, they're going to be heard. And that is really big in the world of women's sports. It's very big in the world where you have a lot of youth that are trying to be very excellent at what they're doing at a young age. Because remember, some of this happened for college athletes, and that's actually where it was exposed first, because they were 18, 19 years old, as opposed to being 13 or 14 years old. Those college athletes are like, what is going on? Nope, don't do it. That's how it started. And what it's done for the world of sports and the world of gymnastics is to understand you've got to listen. Even if you're young and you feel it's not right, your voice needs to be heard.
I wanted to jump in real quick. So I know we want to hear from everyone what brought them first to the conversation, but I just wanted to pick up since Wendy shared so much. And I think for me, that was an anchor in the thinking about the lens for this conversation. And like what you were sharing about the athletes, to me is a symbol in a way. They stand in, I think, for a lot of the people that we've been having our conversation with over time. So yes, we've been targeting conversations to talk about men, and some of this sort of has a gender lens because we're looking at the Simone Biles of the world, or we were looking in the office at the Naomi Osakas of the world. But a lot of what you said translates across race and across age, just like it does across gender. There's people who may show up very visibly in a particular way because of their physicality maybe, but seem voiceless or don't feel like or are not perceived to have something to say. And I think we know month in and month out when we're having these conversations that some of the men, younger men and older men, who may feel like they're in those same positions, it's the same thing. They're just not in the Olympics, but it's the same conversation and they have just as much to say. So because it was so public and you know, both in terms of the Nasser thing, like Simone Biles is saying that, but also about them saying, I need a timeout right now. I am not going to compete tomorrow, but I still have competed and will compete in the future. That seems like a message that really translated too. So I do want to continue to hear from everybody, but I would be remiss if I didn't kind of jump in and say what you said, what you pointed to. There's a lot of power in that, and I think it's very easy to otherize people. That was just something that happened in another country, and they don't look like me, and they're famous or whatever. But it's also very easy to see life lessons by what other people are going through, because it's the same stuff that we're going through as well in our own way.
You know,
I want to jump over to the song that we're going to hear from Jeannie. So I wanted, Ms. Rogers, I want you to kind of frame this song that we're going to listen to, of how it plays into the loneliness and the isolation and the things that we've talked about a little bit about it. And how does your song that we're going to try to listen to, how's that play into this conversation right now? And then we're going to play a snippet of it.
I mean, I think that to pick up from what Brett was saying about his work with suicidal feelings, we think of them as like at the far end of the spectrum. It's a signal of distress. Like your body will tell you all kinds of things along the way when you're getting more and more distressed. When you're thinking those thoughts, hopelessness, I can't do it, you're at that far end of the spectrum. And then it becomes about, well, how much are you thinking about it? Are you just imagining it would be easier? We call that passive suicidal thinking. Or are you starting to make plans and wanting to take action? And that's the farthest end. And it's a scary place to be in. It's hard to see. It's almost like you're blinded and you cannot see that, like, you can come out of this. And I wrote a song that, thank you, Mike, for talking about it. It was written because I read an academic article about a research study that was looking at how teenagers were searching up suicide on the internet. And they were worried that they were encountering negative content. And they wanted to work with that hypothesis. And they actually showed that, in fact, they were finding that these kids were stumbling upon a lot of positive content, a lot of like psychoeducation online, a lot of destigmatization, a lot of like, here's how you can get help, hopeful messages. So I just, as a songwriter, wanted to contribute to that work. And the song is a bit about loneliness, because it's a very lonely place to be when you're feeling suicidal. And it's hard to reach out at that point, because I think it sounds to people like anything being told to them isn't helpful, or it's foreign and people don't understand. So we could listen to it. The first verse is the person who's feeling suicidal describing that loneliness, and also the feeling that like it's going to be impossible for anyone to understand. And then in the chorus, the loved one steps in. And this was also written because I saw a New York Times article that was like titled, like, what do you say to your suicidal loved one? Because people need help, right? As the supporter, they want to know what to say. And so it's a lot about listening, validating, acknowledging you don't know exactly, or, you know, what the person's feeling, not jumping in with a million suggestions, and then like showing how important this person is to you and providing hope. So that's kind of the shape of the song, at least just the first verse and the chorus.
All right, Dave, let's cue it up.
Thank you for that, Jeannie.
I didn't catch that. What did you say? No, I can't do that. It won't work anyway. I'm in pain, can't you see what it's like to be me? You'll never know. It's like a deep pit, and I can't get out. You say just do it. You'll never get what it's about. I'm alone, can't you see what it's like to be me? And so I have to leave, it's the only way. Don't ask me if I have a plan, 'cause I'll say yes, I'm ready to go. And you say, you're right, I don't know what it is you feel, but I know the ground beneath you is falling and it's real. You tell me in the movies when it seems like there's no hope and all the heroes are falling into the quicksand. They grab a hand, so grab mine. Grab my
Wow.
Thank you for sharing that
Yes,
with
yes.
us. Thank you.
Ms. Baker, Daily Lee
Yes,
Baker,
hello.
sorry. How you doing? So I understand this was something up your belly, especially doing stuff with music and MTV. How did this play around the work that you were doing?
Yeah, first I just want to say thank you, Jeannie. That was a great example of how to use media and how to incorporate that into the conversation. And so something I wanted to share too is that, like, first, mental health is not a binary, right? So you're not healthy, you're not ill, it's not one or the other, but instead it exists on this continuum. And we move across that continuum at various points of our lives. And so with that understanding, I believe that entertainment media has this opportunity to represent all aspects of this continuum and help our audiences understand that mental health is just as dynamic, all-encompassing, and individual as physical health. And so something that my team is working on, like one of our big initiatives was mental health is health, and you can actually, I like to plug, so you can actually go to our website. And let me make sure I get it right. Mental health, right? Because I don't want to mess that up. But mental health is health.us. I always say .com, but it's .us. And that's our audience-facing website that you can all view. But essentially, one thing that drawn us, to working with Jeannie is because we just feel like as storytellers, we have this opportunity to not just entertain, but also to educate, to inspire, and to create real change. And we've seen this firsthand, right? So if you think of like just the emotional connection created by entertainment media and how we can move that needle and how we have done so on critical issues such as HIV, LGBTQ rights, immigration, mental health is just another arena where those stories have the power to influence our audience's perceptions and behaviors. And particularly when it comes to self-care, help seeking and supporting the people that we care about. And then also in addition, just like incorporating mental health themes in our work can deeply enrich our storytelling, making our characters more layered and more authentic and more relatable to viewers. So all of that to say that it's just important to, have mental health and like have this concept that mental health is health. That's important for all of us to hear and accept and start to think, and then using media to shift that narrative is what we're doing.
Daly, can you give that that website one more time again?
Yeah, I was like, let me not butcher that.
I didn't hear it all, but I want, because we want to put it in the chat, and I also want to let our guests know who are online viewing. If you log into your YouTube account, you can chat with the panelists. Please log into your website on YouTube, so you can chat with us, those who are on. So Daly, give it to us again.
Yes, it's mentalhealthishealth.us.
I hope my man behind the scene got that. And Jeannie, I think we can put the link to the video up also. Is that cool? You're muted.
Where do I put it up? We
have it.
We
have it.
can.
I just want to say it's okay. We can put it in the chat, so people want to hear the full song. They can link on it, hear the full song. We're good?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm having an anxiety attack, Scott.
What's going on, Brett? How can we work with this now?
Lord have mercy. You all triggered a whole experience here, right? So when we talk about these things, we have to remember the human experience, right? So these are not words we're talking about. And I just had to really take a deep breath and sit back, because I had to walk away from a marriage with 4 kids after getting into a very, 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 very deep depressive state. And you talk about loneliness. Loneliness is something you can't even talk about just as a word. You have to understand the experience of loneliness when you're in a marriage with someone that you commit to, or a relationship. You commit to this person, you give your all to this person, you're there for the person, but your emotional needs are not being met. And so this takes you down into then we talk about the gender side of it, where males don't talk about emotions or express their emotions. So males are out here suffering and struggling while we're promoting our females and supporting our females. And, I got to a point where, even today, I still struggle with loneliness, because I don't feel like any relationship that I've ever been in, I was understood for. Even if I say it and I explain it and I talk about it, how I'm feeling, I still feel like the societal aspects of generations of talking about emotions or lack of emotions for males put males at such a great disadvantage that when we talk about our emotions, people still don't even understand what that means. You're still being told to man up, to be strong and all that. So, you look at Lisa's work when it comes to marriages and relationships and the need for that. I look at my work dealing with the human experience of that. When, I step into that dark place with someone who is going through that experience, I'm not the one on the outside saying, hey, come over here, let's talk about this, because I don't know I know what the experience is. I almost completed a murder-suicide that I had to walk away from someone I loved with my all, because I got to that point where the pain was, it was blinding. So when we talk and people are listening to this, people need to understand that we understand here the human experience. We're not just talking about these words. We're not just talking about our work as careers. We're talking about experiences that someone listening right now may say, holy crap, you just talked about loneliness. And right now I'm in a marriage or intimate relationship and I'm lonely. It's driving me nuts. I don't know who I'm talking to. I'm drinking myself to death, smoking myself to death, and doing all these things to cope with the pain. But then who do I go to? Where do I go? And the reality is there aren't safe spaces in our homes or in our communities where we can really talk non-judgmentally and unbiased about these things. So while it's good that we're talking, I really just felt this lump in my throat, because these words are so, they're real. They're my experiences. They're things that I'm dealing with right now. And the feeling of loneliness, Dan, the loneliness for male is not something that anyone can really has really depicted in such a way of the experience. Like it kills you. It literally takes the life blood out of you. Some of us who are high functioning, we're functioning, but we're not emotionally stable because of the pain that we're feeling from these things. But we're good at what we do. We put on a good face. You see me, I'm a very good looking guy. You see all this cuteness, handsomeness right here. It's all good. But hey, nobody would ever look and say, oh my God, Brett. But then when I did come out, listen to this. When I did come out, and I did express that I was feeling depressed, feeling suicidal, 98% of the people in my life walked away from me, professionally and personally, because they said something is wrong with you. Something is wrong with you. Ask me how many people came to me and say, hey, Brett, hey, brother, let me give you a hug. Let me ask you what's going on. Let me ask you how you're doing. Can I help? How can I help? And that's why this conversation tonight is so critical for me. And I'm glad that I'm here because I want to represent the real experience of those who are listening and saying, you know what? That guy right there is talking about me right now. That guy right there just touched on exactly how I'm feeling, why I'm feeling, hearing all these things being talked about by all these great people. So together, this conversation for all of us, bringing it full circle, professionally, our expertise, lived experiences, all of that holistically for everybody. And Jeannie, that song right there, I'm going to be singing that song and sharing that song every day, everywhere.
That means so much. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. And like, I just, and I just wanted to make a plug in this moment too, for like, you know, that experience you had of everybody's fear around you about mental health and their own reaction to you when you were having a hard time. And this is why therapists exist. They are an opportunity to have like a different type of relationship with someone who's not going to tell you their issues and they're not going to have reactions to you. They are professionally trained to try to begin the healing process. And so, Scott, I don't know if I sent somebody a hotline too, in case there's someone out there who's like exactly feeling what Brett is describing and wants to try this, because, you know, it is sort of like, sometimes it's hard to put our finger on this experience of the mind. And it's helpful to speak in terms of the analogy of the body, because the mind is the body, it is the brain. But it's almost like what talking can do when you're feeling so acutely in distress is it's like an abscess. You know, if you have like a pus-filled abscess and it's causing like all this pain and it's stretching on your skin, and then you kind of release it, you puncture it and it starts to come out. This is sort of like it helps people maybe to understand like why talking can be actually like a physical thing you do that releases pressure and pain. So that hotline is the 888-NYC-WELL hotline. But I don't know, Mike, if you have, or Scott, other ones that you like to, you know, or Jerry, recommend. Yeah.
There are several, and we can keep returning to them. So you've listed one. Brett has shared hotline and other information. We can do that as we go. And since I have the mic, I'm going to say one thing, and maybe Brett and Lisa want to jump back in. But what has just emerged for me right now is a really helpful and a digestible understanding of what therapy is, or what therapy can be. And I'm reflecting a lot of conversations I've had with men or my friends over the years, which started from the premise, well, if you have a good few friends, you don't really need that. But listen to what Brett said and what you said. I have a few good friends. We talk about a lot of stuff, but there's a lot of reflecting back to each other, even in their friendships. Oh yeah, I'm going to do that too. And that's great. You can have a shared experience and you can figure out how to support each other on your journey. But you just described someone who is there specifically to be there for you that doesn't need to take turns with you. It's your turn. I love that. I love that. I hope people are listening to that. Like, if you don't want to take a turn right now, that's fine. You can problem solve with your group. That's cool. But if you say, it's my turn, there are people that want to help you take your turn. I think that was very succinct. That was really cool, really helpful.
Yeah, if I could just jump in real quick, and then I'll bridge it with Lisa, Dan, and Brett. Just our topic, right? Underestimating the emotional, mental level of resiliency that we do have, and how loneliness really hits in, and just the dynamic and complexity of loneliness, right? I would love to just say, hey, loneliness is this one little thing, but loneliness is so big. Like, there's a difference between loneliness and isolation, right? And even when we talk about race and gender, just the generational and systemic separation, or even the emotionlessness burden of being an athlete, which creates another dynamic of loneliness. Of to be successful in my state of being a great athlete, I have to be by myself and hold my vulnerabilities to myself. And so I guess I want to start off with Dan, and then if Lisa, you can jump in as relates to what that looks like in a family unit, because Lord knows how much isolation and loneliness happened during COVID, right? What does that look like for the typical person who is listening right now, the difference between loneliness and isolation, and what are those risk factors? And if we could speak to that from a family dynamic.
Man, my mind's going crazy with all these thoughts and wanting to connect everything here. And I think, Brett, I just want to thank you for sharing with us. But and that's so meaningful, and I think highlights so many important topics. As far as isolation goes, Brett obviously has a ton of different connections going on. What you need is, the difference between isolation and loneliness. A famous person can have tons of contacts, but not have a lot of meaning within those contacts. And that would be the difference between isolation and loneliness. And then bringing it back to Jeannie, your song, even the title of it, Just Hold My Hand. And there was one line that said, like, all of the heroes have fallen or have fallen. That really spoke to me because I could appreciate that that's the feeling when you're going through this. And what I want to convey to all of you is you all are the heroes. Reaching out and holding someone's hand, going for a walk in the park. I mean, I don't know how much that could have an impact for someone who might be having feelings of suicidal feelings or feelings of being lonely. And just those little actions and making a stronger connection, putting the phone down and following up with a friend, checking in on your neighbor and following up is really can go a long way. As far as family go, I think especially in COVID, a lot of the social media I think is a big topic, and not to open like Pandora's box with all like the Facebook files and stuff like that. But the social media can have a huge impact, both positive and negative. Connecting to your family through Zoom or this meeting right here, seeing someone's face can really have a giant impact, and connecting them. I know my parents love seeing my little ones, and it brings them so much joy when they've been isolated and locked into their room for a long time. On the other side, I'm not a huge social media user myself, but I do Twitter, and it's kind of my, and I scroll through that. And one thing to ask yourself about how social media is impacting you is to think about, how do I feel after I scroll through this? Is it really making those connections? Does it have meaningful insight in there? Am I connecting to somebody that I can follow up with? And if the answer is yes, it's helping you, then that's great. But I think in my case, I'll tell you that just reading a lot of the news just gives me a lot of anxiety and puts me out of touch as opposed to meeting up with my neighbors. There's a lot to go on there. But again, I just, that song spoke to me, and I just want to really stress that finding your belonging, your connections with others, holding each other's hands, and even if you're not even talking, just holding hands, and that connection can really make a big difference. So great conversation.
I wanted to jump in here as kind of a layperson and all these great therapists here. And Jeannie, what you were talking about, but how do you get a person who may not want to talk to a therapist to engage with a therapist? Or what can we do? Because if you think of someone who could use a therapist, how do you direct them in that? Because a lot of people don't feel like reaching out. And so how do you kind of help that process?
So the first question was like, how do you engage the person who's resistant? Mm-hmm. And that's like the art that I love. So I guess that's why I do this job, but I do love to in my training, we learned this term, surface to depth. So like you want to stay when someone comes into your room, and starts to talk, you want to stay right with them with the subject that's important to them. Like their husband might have called and said she needs to deal with her drinking. If she comes in and wants to talk about the problem with the mice in the home, that's what you're talking about, because that is real for that person, whether it's because they're in denial or whether it, you want to start right there and then take time. Don't be like bringing up the hard topics right away in the first session and pushing people's defenses up, because the psychological defenses are there to protect us. And they mean we will walk out that door. If someone says something that triggers something, that's our defense. And so it's about dancing around the defenses and slowly letting them fall with trust. with a relationship. You're basically forming a relationship. But as far as how do you try to help someone get there, it's tricky. I think validation, like asking them, how come you don't want to go? And they're like, well, because I saw this person when I was 10 and they were a jerk. And being like, well, there are a lot of jerky therapists out there. That's true. And like, just like, let me just tell you about an experience I had, a positive experience I had. Or is it is it cost? Let's look at a place where you don't have to try to strain the cost, like trying to figure out what that person's personal barriers are, but not in a way that makes them feel like I think sometimes people feel like they're getting the message from someone like, well, I don't want to get into it with you. You need a therapist. So you have to be careful of like, I guess that messaging too, with someone you're close to.
Yeah. I thought, Jeannie, you at a lot of great points about how to engage someone who doesn't think they need therapy. I see folks like that a lot. And most people in family or couples therapy, they come to therapy pointing the finger at the other person. And it's not me, it's them. My parents think I should be here, but they should really be here, not me. It's not me, it's my partner, right? And I think the same way Jeannie said, it's meeting people where they are. I find in working with adolescents and working with couples and working with families, oftentimes if the person who doesn't think they should be there comes with someone else, right? So I'll come with you, but I don't really need to be there. If they're in the room, they're listening, right? And listening is also a part of therapy, which is huge. I think the other thing about therapy, people hear it, and I think there's still these negative stereotypes that get perpetuated around therapy is for crazy people. And I'm not crazy, so I'm not going to therapy. I will see a life coach, but I won't see a therapist, right? And then to me, we're talking about semantics, right? A little bit of training, but semantics, right? But I think to the point, you have to meet people where they are. There are some people who won't see a life coach, they won't see a therapist, but they will hop on, and I can't recall the platform, the text therapy, right? So, right, it's not as threatening, it's not as intimate, and it's another way to meet people where they are. We're also in the age of telehealth, where therapy or life coaching or conversations are so much more accessible. So there's not the shame of walking into a therapist's office. So I feel like now more than ever, there are so many wonderful, creative to reach people and to engage them.
Yeah.
So I just really quickly, I think that I echo everything that's been said. But also not everyone is ready for therapy at the time, right? Like, so I think we have to take kind of cues from people, kind of what they want at the time. Like you guys are talking about that. One of the things that I have probably ushered many people and continue to try to usher many people in my own family to therapy, like talk to a therapist. It's always good to have someone to speak to who's not judgmental. They're just kind of there for you. And what I hear a lot of times is, I don't want people in my business. I don't want anyone in my business. I don't want anyone psychoanalyzing me or getting deeper, because a lot of times people haven't done that reflection themselves. And so they're not necessarily ready to open that kind of what they see as Pandora's box. So I think first it's accepting that everyone is not necessarily ready for therapy when you think that they're ready for therapy. But I also do see that people recognize when they're not feeling well and when things are not going right. So I think sometimes kind of asking people and talking to people about kind of how do they want things to be versus how things are right now, I think can be a helpful kind of tool. I oftentimes will talk about kind of correlating kind of physical health with mental health. Like if someone had kind of diabetes, they would go get, their insulin. And it's the same thing. It's taking care of your mind, your body, and your spirit. I think, and I wanted to kind of go back to something that Brett had said a little earlier, and it really rang true to me. It's like, you never really know what people are going through, right? You pass by thousands of people every day, and you never know what they have just gone through, what they've been through in their lives, which brings me back to the whole kind of trauma thing, right? And I think we talk about trauma as like, oh, it's like sexual assault, you've been in a big fire, maybe 9/11. But trauma, it really ranges, right? It ranges from, being bullied, separation from a caregiver early on, failed relationships. I know no one here has had, a failed relationship, but that actually impacts how you enter into your next relationships, right? So I think it's about one, recognizing that kind of trauma is pretty universal. It's not these huge traumas that everyone thinks about, but it's kind of the small things over time that accumulate and really impact the way we feel about ourselves, the way that we attach and kind of connect to other people, and then how we kind of learn to manage our emotional existence as well. So I think really thinking, if we can really start to think about kind of how am I functioning in this world, and think of it as a response to or as a result of kind of our experiences, I think it helps people to realize that, okay, I've had these experiences, I'm ready to kind of go ahead and tackle them. But I want to just kind of point that not everyone is ready to see a therapist.
And I agree with that point. And I just want to add on, there's readiness and there's willingness.
Right. Absolutely.
We are not ready, but are we willing to? And sometimes willingness can be enough.
I'm trying to get Danielle, you want to get in? Bailey Lee?
Oh,
I know you're trying to jump in.
I was like, am I frozen? Yeah, just really quickly. Just a different perspective coming, from MTV Entertainment Group, something that we do. So I work on a lot of unscripted shows. And so these are real people, kind of like what you're saying, but this is a human experience. These are real people. This is real things. These aren't just words. And so something that we're doing to help normalize mental health and like how to take action for your mental health is showing this like relatable conversations about mental health in our content. Obviously, if talent wants to do that, we are happy to explore how to share their stories and then help them and provide them with resources to share their stories. And like one example and something that I am really proud of is just thinking I don't know if people were watching Black Ink Crew Chicago, but Four on that show opened up about his mental health. And that was just such a powerful scene because he's a Black man and, you don't see that on TV. So, and it's real. So it's like, you get to see it firsthand. So we are working hard over here to continue that and to push those because Wendy, like your question about like, if they don't want to go to therapy, how do you get them to go to therapy? Like there's so many different reasons why, an individual may not want to engage in it. And so something that we want to do with media is to normalize it and then also show different ways of like how to do it. So maybe like, I'm some kid watching the show and I see that a talent or someone that I really like is talking about mental health, or they went and talked to a therapist on the show. So now it's something that I'm now thinking about like, oh, okay, I see someone who looks like me and maybe this is something that I can do. And so that's something that we're trying to do on the media side.
So I want to just thank you all for that. Again, I'm here as a person going through the experience, right? So one thing is I've been through multiple types of trauma. I've had near-death experiences. I've been on the operating table multiple times. I've been on the operating table times they said I've died. None of those traumatic experiences were near the psychological trauma that I've experienced that wanted me to kill myself. I mean, I have broken bones, broken this, broken that. I have a history of so much trauma, but psychological trauma is a whole different beast. That's one. Two, even if I'm willing, Lisa, to come to you or to you, Michael, and as we're talking about therapy or ready for therapy, I may not be able to explain how I'm feeling. I just know that I'm in pain. I just know that I'm going through a lot. I just know that I would rather die than go through this pain. I'm not sure where it's coming from. I'm not sure what triggered it, where it's coming from. So if you give me half an hour to sit with you for a session, and I'm here sitting down in my head for the first half an hour trying to figure out what the hell am I going to say to this person now for them to understand how I'm feeling. I'm ready and I'm willing. I just can't put it into words. Then that's another issue. We have this system in our societies where we're giving people time to express how they are feeling, and that time may not be enough for that person. And so I know personally people who have walked out of a session because at the 59th minute or the 29th minute, they were like, okay, I'm sorry, our time is up, the session is up, come back next week, or we see you for another month or two. Where does that person go? What do they do? And Daly, you talked about mental health. One of the things that I have a very big problem with, and I see a lot every day in our mental health events, is mental health is a broad topic. We're not narrowing those topics down to like depression and suicide, which are the two key issues that we're having hard times getting people to open up about. So when we say mental health, it is so broad. We gotta narrow down. Like that's why for me, my work, and they call me the suicide man. No matter where I go, I talk about suicide. I don't care whether you like it or not. I'm going to talk about and representing suicide because we need to normalize that. I mean, the suicide rates since COVID I've never seen this. I've been doing this 20 years focusing on, I've never seen this many people with suicidality, but we're still trying to wrap it up nicely under mental health and wrap it up under that. And no, so let's talk about how do we get people to be comfortable knowing they're not okay, to just simply sit down and just say, hey, Jerry, I don't know how I'm feeling, man. I just know that right now, I just feel like SHIT. I just feel like whatever F, B, C, D letter comes out of their mouth. Because I know people who told me, they say, I go to a therapist and I can't connect with this person. I see a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and I can't connect with this person. So I'm asking them, why do you come to me? They say, well, I heard you talk about being suicidal. I heard you talk about your experience of suicide. I heard you talk about living with depression and all that. So you definitely will know what I'm talking about. And so, Lisa, to your point, they will go to a life coach or they will go to somebody else, not realizing it's the same form of therapy. Talk therapy is the same thing, just under a different umbrella. But the goal is, let's get people to realize that it's okay to not know how they're feeling. It's okay to not be okay, but just simply say, I just don't know how or where. I just know I'm not feeling good. I'm not feeling right.
Well, Brett, I think you just said it best. It's okay not to be okay. And I totally agree with your point that mental health, right? It's legislative, it's insurance, right? It's compartmentalizing your feelings into a 50-minute session with a therapist who you were matched with and who may not be aligned with you in terms of race, in terms of gender, in terms of so many social identities. And I think as a community, we have to get better about how we match therapists and clients together because the relationship is everything. And Brett, I could see based on what you shared, why people would seek you out. So that's one thing. I think the other thing outside of the 50-minute whatever window, there are ways that therapy can be transportable because I totally agree with you. People have been living with their problems for many, many years before they see a therapist. They are not new to this rodeo, right? And I think that the challenge for the therapist is how do you make therapy transportable and how do you enlist a support system so the person is not leaving without anything, without any support. And transportable therapy could be journaling. It could be a homework task that's given to someone, but it gets them thinking about and acting on in a real way, ways to make their lives better or to feel better outside of therapy. And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, just to echo what Lisa was saying, that support system, I know for a fact, any therapist will tell you, like, that therapist alone is not going to move the needle. It's creating an environment and a space where you can live in a healthy mental state in a continuous basis, right? And so as I even look at the panel of everyone that we're speaking to, from athletic coaches to media to counselors, just creating an entire lifestyle of what that looks like across the board. Dial mentioned just the opportunity of media and what that looks like. And so I'm actually thinking of from an athlete's perspective. So now I'm gonna jump into the sports world, right? And Scott, I may lean on you a little bit, right? Even as a former athlete myself, it's now that you are in a space where you say, hey, coach, I ain't got it. You know what I'm saying? You couldn't say that before. Like, that wasn't a part of the language. I saw maybe for the past couple of seasons, yes, he's getting older too, but LeBron would literally take mid throughout the season. All right, I'm going to take a little vacation in Miami for like 2-3 days just to reset and then come back to it. You see Simone Biles saying, I'm not there right now. And so first, I guess I'll start with you, Wendy. If you could bring us into the mindset, and Scott, the mindset of an athlete when you are in that space where I don't have it, what does that conversation look like to your coach and then to any other type of help that may come along?
Yeah, well, I wanted to point out, especially with Simone, and I was watching it live when she was at the Olympics and then had to decide not to compete. And you have to understand this one thing. The Olympic Games has everything set. Let's say she had injured her ankle. They had a process set up to have the next person go or for her to come out. The fact that it was mental illness, no one knew what to do with it. They didn't know how. Can you just come off the team? Can you go this? This was something totally new. And I don't think people understand what she did at that moment. It wasn't a physical injury. It was mental. Everybody who's a gymnast who saw her do what she did, it's called the twisties. We knew that it wasn't right. And in her case, it was dangerous. She's such a great athlete. When you're 6 feet above the vault and you're spinning and twisting and you don't know what you're doing, that is very, very dangerous and it can be lethal. But what she did and saying I can't do it right now was really groundbreaking, and it made everybody stop to say, you have to listen to your mind. You have to do this. That's the one thing that she did, which was very helpful. And I think what it's doing to everybody and to all athletes is that as someone mentioned before, it's mind and body. People just have to realize, they didn't think so, but you just can't do it without your head. Yeah, you just cannot move that way. And so what we do in sports is, like you said, now coaches, because it's a whole safe sport movement, everybody is stepping back and realizing they have to ask the athlete, how are you doing mentally? Can you do this? And the one point I did want to put out, what Brett said, which I think was really important, is living with depression. I think, everybody wants to go and do something to get fixed or go to a therapist to think that you can do something, but I want you to talk a little bit about the life that if you are in a depressive state, you have to live with that and also manage it on a day-to-day basis. It may not be always something just to turn around and fix.
Yep. So wow. Miss Wendy, I love you. Thank you. So who fixes it? Who fixes you? Where do you get a fix? How do you get a fix? What if the fixes that you need are social issues that you can't get? What if the fixes are to be in a relationship with someone who you keep telling every single day, like, I need your help, I'm struggling, I'm hurting, I'm going through a lot, and this person just looks at you with this wide stare, like, what are you asking me to do? What are you telling me that for? How do you fix someone who their whole life revolves around being around people? I'm loved by so many people. Scott, Jerry, they can tell you I am loved by a lot of people. I'm highly respected by a lot of people. But how many people know that I deal with loneliness? I don't have friends. I don't have people who I can go sit down and talk with on an emotional level, because it's not comfortable like that. I've gotten a lot of people, Miss Wendy, who will say, Brett, if you ever need someone to talk to, call me. And when I do try to call them, or I do call and get them, as soon as I open my mouth for 5 seconds, the whole conversation flips around to them and what they're going through and everything else. And so, this whole idea of living with this, Miss Wendy, it's overwhelming. I mean, it really literally makes you question yourself as a person and ask yourself, what am I doing here? What is my value? What is my worth? Do people only see me for who I am, for what I can give for them, what I can do for them, what my title, my role is? You start questioning, and then it literally, you're like in a prison within your mind, fighting with yourself about these things. And how do you explain that? Lisa, people definitely think you're crazy when you try to tell them, like, this is what the experience is like. And there's no other way to deal with that. So now I'm voluntarily going in for therapy. I'm volunteering to go into a place that I heard offers mental health services, and I'm sitting with someone who still don't even understand. And this is a licensed clinical person who's supposed to know, but doesn't understand, what I'm going through or know what I'm going through. So the other side of that is making sure you find someone, because there are some very good therapists and there are some not good therapists. There are some good counselors and they're not so good counselors. You have to be the one to find someone that you connect with, that can allow you to connect with that person and be open. 95% of the people who come to me never talk to their therapist the way they talk to me. 95% never talk to their therapist the way they. So I'm asking them the question, hold on, wait a minute. Have you shared this with your therapist? Have you actually talked to your therapist? Yeah, but I just don't feel like they're listening. They're just listening, but they're not getting it. Or so the fixing part, Miss Wendy, is one of the biggest challenges we face, because there's this idea that we have to fix people. I don't need you to fix me. First of all, my needs of why I'm depressed or why I'm suicidal may not be in your reach of what to solve. But if you don't know, as Lisa said, of how to make connections, so Lisa may have to call Michael and say, hey, Michael, I have Brett here. Brett's going through some issues. I need your help to work with Brett. So it's not just one therapist. It's a therapist who realized that it's okay for me to connect with another therapist to see how we can help this person who is going through it. I walked into a healthcare center asking for help. When I sat with the clinical social worker and told him how I was feeling, he said, listen, we're gonna have to bring someone else in, because what you're sharing with me right now, I feel like this is a high risk, a self-harm situation. He calls in the head therapist of the center. She comes in, she sits, he tells her what I've told him, and she says, wow, you're a high risk of self-injury for yourself. We're gonna have to keep you. I said, excuse me? I said, let me explain something to you. First of all, don't think that I'm not resilient. My exact words. Don't think I'm not resilient in living with what I've been living with, this suicidality and this depression. You may hear it as a high risk of me being self-harm, but you're not asking me or assessing my resilience to manage my depression and my anxiety and suicidality. So let me leave out of here before this becomes another situation. And they both sat there looking at each other like, hold on, wait a minute, what just happened? Hold on, wait, what just happened? Like, did he just say he was suicidal and have a plan, but now he's leaving? We can't have him leave because that's a legality. All they were thinking now in their head is the legalities aspect of it, rather than thinking to themselves, like, this man just told you that he was resilient enough to manage the depression and suicide thoughts that he was having and a plan to not kill himself.
If I could just bridge what Brett just said, because I thought that was super, super powerful. And I'm going to lean in on Jeanine, and even, well, I saw Lisa just stepped out, but Jeanine, if we could talk about the fit, I think that is so crucial. Lisa, Jeannie.
Lisa came back for that.
I had to pull her back right quick, right?
Lisa came right back.
Yeah, just real quick. Any therapist know, like, we're in the barbershop right now. I cross maybe 4 boroughs to get my haircut because I do not trust anybody else on the little bit of hair that I got left, right? And I feel like a therapist literally it's about finding the right fit that you can hold on to, that you can really make a connection with. And so starting with Jeanine, and then Lisa, if you can circle that out, just how important and how do you create the right fit from a person coming to find the right counselor? How do I say, hey, I found the right match for me?
No, this is so frustrating about getting mental health care because it's hard enough to find a practitioner, but that's like lucky if you go to somebody and it's the right fit. Sometimes it's like it's dating a little bit, like it's like a shopping experience for like somebody that you feel, again, in that first session, didn't put up too many defenses, because people will say things and you'll know right away, I don't want to hear about yours. Like, so a therapist might be like, oh yeah, my sister was like that when I was a kid. You're like, I don't want to hear about your problems. Maybe you're someone who likes to hear about a therapist's problems. Maybe that makes you feel like it's more relatable. As far as like identity goes and finding someone who has a similar background, cultural, LGBTQ, that's also very personal. I think, in training, we were often taught that you can certainly ask, like, do you prefer a man or a woman? But when it comes down to it, I like what Lisa said, the relationship is everything. So keep an open mind about that, because you may find, I see a Chinese individual who had seen a Chinese therapist and now sees me. You know what I'm saying? It's sort of like wait and see about the person's skill. But if that's important to you, go for it, lean into it, like whatever's gonna, yeah. But it's, and also I think to tell your loved ones and yourself, like, this is a pain, this is a total pain to go like see 3 people, but it's worth it. You're investing in yourself, and it shows yourself that you have like self-love and self-worth, that you're giving yourself that time to find the right person. I don't know, Lisa, I pitched that to you.
This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I think as a therapist, And as someone who's been in therapy and has been a therapy seeker, like we're talking about, I think the right fit is everything. And I think obviously the relationship is the most key thing. But I think as a person of color who has worked with white therapists and also therapists of color, I think there can be things that are specific to your experience based on your gender, based on your sexual identity, based on your race, based on your immigration, that is very important for the therapist to have an understanding of, and to come to the conversation with that. And obviously we can't walk in everyone's shoes and we don't have every lived experience of our clients. But I think for many people, having similar social identities are very, very important. I think there's a lot of work in the field that's being done in terms of linking therapy seekers with more aligned therapists based on factors of social location, based on gender, based on race, based on age, based on immigration. I cannot tell you, when I worked at the Ackerman Institute as their director of training, they had the longest waiting list to work with a Black male therapist. The longest waiting list. There were so many people who were coming in, mothers with young boys of color who said, I want to work with a person of color, a male person of color. There are so few male therapists of color in the field, and they always have a waiting list, right? So that's when I say training matters, relationship matters, but that lived experience also matters. I think, many clinics now, and the biggest thing is, I think when you're seeking therapy, and I think, Jeannie, you said, it's like dating. I don't know about anyone else, but the first person I didn't marry. And I sure have dated a lot before I got married. And I think that's the beauty of having a consultation, right? Many therapists offer a complimentary consultation where you can chat with someone via Zoom, right? For 15 or so minutes to get a sense of how you feel talking to that person. How do you feel just chatting with them? How do you feel sitting in their office, right? And I think it's also looking at the style of the therapist. I think that's also important. I think therapy is becoming much more nuanced and it's becoming much more diverse. So I think now I really, again, advocating for what's important to you as a therapist, I think is key. And there are a lot of great websites that are specific to looking at particular variables for therapists. For instance, zencare.co. You can really put in the training that you want the therapist to have, their racial background, all sorts of issues. You can also look at therapy for Black girls as another great clearinghouse. But when you go to a clinic, you can say, I specifically would like to work with a male therapist or an African-American male therapist. And by all means, advocate for yourself when it comes to finding a good fit for a therapist.
Dr. Mcrae, you want to jump in real quick? So you're biting at the bit.
Well, yeah. I can attest. I think that everywhere I go, people are saying, "Hey, I need a therapist for my son. You're a Black male. Can you please see him?" I don't have a practice here, so but I can attest that there's definitely a need or kind of a calling for more male therapists of color. I wanted to kind of talk about kind of the fit because I think that can kind of cut both ways. I think it is important to kind of have that good fit. But sometimes having like an experience, obviously if someone can kind of connect to your, experience or be able to talk about it in a way that it's sensitive, I think that can be just as helpful as having someone who's matched on that kind of social demographic. I have seen, people in my own practice some time ago. For example, I had a Black male who came in and he identified as a gay male and wanted to kind of explore that. But I think he wanted nothing more. To see like a white lady. Because he didn't know kind of where I was coming from, and kind of from the very beginning. So I think people come into therapy and into the session with their own experiences, own expectations, own biases, and fears. And so I think it's important to kind of do that kind of dance to figure out kind of, is this a good fit, regardless of kind of the makeup of the person who's being seen. But I do agree that the match is everything. A lot of times people don't really want to go shopping for therapists because they feel like they don't want to get into it and then have to kind of tell it to somebody else. So it's all understandable. So I think it's just kind of entering the situation with kind of empathy, compassion, and really trying to connect to that person's experience.
This is a perfect timing. And I see we have another panelist that just joined us. Dr. Jeffrey Gardier. We're talking about dating our therapist to make the right match. How would you talk about that? And you date some of the biggest people around the world with the stars and the athletes that you how do you see about this kind of like making the right match of your therapist to you? And we were talking about maybe it's almost like dating, like you kind of have to date around to get the right one. So
right.
Dr. Jeffrey Gardier.
Well, first of all, hello, everyone. I do have to tell you that it is so great to be back in a barbershop since I haven't had hair in I don't know how many years. But I agree with Lisa and Michael that there are various factors, of course, that come along with getting the right therapist. You call it dating the therapist, and we all know what that means, of course, ethically. It's about spending some time getting to know that person and seeing, whether you feel comfortable enough, whether you are making any kind of breakthroughs with that particular person, whether it's a situation that you want to continue. I think too often, some of our clients are afraid to say, I don't think this really works. It's almost like real dating, right? I don't think this is working, but instead they linger on. And I think sometimes the therapist has to have the courage as well as the client to say, I don't think this is the right fit. Here, I think there's someone who might be able to maybe meet your needs in a different way than I can. But until that happens, I'm with you all the way and will make sure that the handoff is perfect. But that's certainly different than just saying, you know what, I don't want to work with this person, or I don't like this person. But making it something that benefits the client, at any particular time. I've had many clients. Yes, I've worked with all sorts of people. Some, we've worked together for years. Some with boosters where, every couple of weeks, every couple of months, but certainly some where it just wasn't really happening. And, that old saying, they shoot horses, don't they? Someone had to take us out of our misery. And so when the client wasn't able to do that, giving some options to the client to see what can I do better? And if I can't, how can I help you find someone who is better? So you can't let ego get involved. Right, Wendy? Hi, Wendy.
No, how are you? No, it's very right. You can't let ego get in the way. And I have to say, amongst all this, when Jerry mentioned about finding his barber, going to go wherever you go, anyone who's doing hair knows how that is. And I think taking the time, 'cause you don't want to get a bad haircut, but when you find someone or you find that fit, you will just stay with it. And I think people can really relate with that part. It really hit home.
Yeah, and sometimes, and very quickly, and sometimes you outgrow your therapist, right? Right? Sometimes the client outgrows the therapist, and the job of the therapist is to make sure they're meeting every need of that client. And so sometimes you have to point that out to them. Every once in a while, I'll say to a client, listen, we've been meeting every week. I think now we can start doing this, every other week, or we can do this once a month, or whatever the case may be. I mean, it's great. I have 6 kids and I can use the money to buy a new pair of shoes, but let's not get carried away here. Let's save your pocketbook and let's make sure that your emotional needs are met in the best way possible.
No, absolutely. I think sometimes, you work with certain therapists for reasons and seasons. Right? Every therapist and every relationship, every marriage is not meant to be forever. And I think it's the therapist being willing enough to think about what's in the best interest of the client and to be vulnerable. And I think for clients to step into their power, but every relationship, like some things are just for a period of time, and that's okay. And I think, Jeff, to your point, then helping the client, if they want to work further, to take their self-work to the next level or to a different level by working with someone else. And to me, that's about a good relationship. It's knowing when to say, to your point, like, I think we're done here. I think we're good.
So I want to kick it up a notch because, and I want to kick it up and kind of go back to where Jerry, I guess he was lobbing it to myself and Wendy. And some of us, we're professionals and we're at a high level of stress that we deal with on a regular basis. And I'll just think back to my sports day, where you're not allowed, and it could actually be financially detrimental to you to talk about being mentally unprepared or needing your own mental health. And Delhi, because even think in the music industry, how does somebody say like, you know what, I'm off? And as we have seen, many musicians, when they have that off period, that may kill their whole career. As an athlete, especially in playing sports, playing football, which is a gladiator sport, you're not allowed to hurt. You're not allowed to say, I have a mental hiccup. You're not allowed to, because that would be what will kill your career immediately, and you will be the worst one. And I know Dr. Jeffrey Gardere, you deal with a lot of these high-level people who have to be very secretive about needing mental health. So, so Ms. Baker, I even start with you or Wendy and Dr. Jeffrey Gardere, bring you in. So how do you work with these, or how do we work with high level? Because we're all on here, and I hear that some people have their own therapists, like, you know, Brett, you definitely help out with that also. How do you get to us as professionals to be able to see that for ourselves?
So Scott,
oh, go ahead.
Daly, I'm sorry. I think first let's just take the word professional out and just let people realize that take your titles away, take your status away, and just remember you're a human being and that your titles add on to you as a person. So
Brett, I would say sometimes we can't do that.
No.
And I agree with you, but I think sometimes we can't do that.
But there's a reason why I said that.
Okay.
Scott. And it comes back down to finding the right person to work with. I do have a lot of high profile people from all different sectors that comes to me. And the reason why they come to me is because they know that in the work that I do, there is no trail of me reporting back to wherever they are for what the work they do. They know firsthand that if there is a report that they're seeking mental health services or experiencing mental health issues, it will impact their license, their work, or stuff. So we have a problem in our society with that. And that's one of the things that we need to, you know, as Wendy talked about the fixes, we have to fix that so that whatever title you have, whatever professional status you're at, seeking help in mental health services is not the same. Now, when Michael Phelps talked about needing mental health services and promoting talk space, a lot of people looked at him and said, well, he can do that, but I couldn't do that. He could do that, but I couldn't do that. So yeah, so you talk about sports people, not all of us are in the same category when we look at that. And we have to be very careful of that because some people do take the chance and say, okay, you know what, I'm going to, and they go in. I have a lot of people who work for government entities who do not go into their services that their insurance covers within their union, within the entities they work. They seek service outside of that because, again, they don't want it documented or even know that they're seeking services. So professionally across the board, whether you're into sports, health, government, or whatever it is, law enforcement, there is a very serious issue with this idea of being a professional and seeking services coming back to you as a risk of losing your job or your status.
Danielle, you want to say something? Delhi?
Oh, yes, that's me. Hello.
Go ahead.
I just my entertainment perspective of it, and something that I find I'm just really proud of my company is that we just have these commitments to mental health. And so one of the big things that we've done, because it is important to to showcase that, like on but also like it's important for us, especially on set, to make sure like talent is good, to make sure the crew is good, and to have that kind of support. So I know that on certain sets there are like on-site counselors or on-site support systems there, so that if there's something that happens like on set, like when the cameras are rolling, pause the cameras, and then the talent or whoever it is can speak to that professional that is on site. And I think that is an amazing resource that we have. And then something else is that, we are not, like, I am not a psychiatrist, I am not a psychologist, by any means, and I'm working with a bunch of creatives. And so there's this, and I feel like I'm plugging a lot, but we do have this new thing that we just launched, and it's our mental health media guide. And it's for entertainment and creative professionals. And it's pretty, there's a lot of information on there. And again, I can give the website, people are just excited or, just curious and want to poke around, but essentially what it is it's this groundbreaking, comprehensive resource for content creators designed to help expand positive mental health portrayals. And so there's best practices and evidence-based recommendations. It's an interactive tool. And the purpose is to support storytellers at any phase in the production process across topics and with an eye towards representing diverse communities. So I know earlier Brett was talking about not saying like mental health as this broad thing. Like if you, for this particular site that we have, or this resource that we have, we do break it down. So there's different, like if you want to learn, if someone is, if a talent is talking about suicide or wants to, showcase that story, we have ways to inform and help them do that in a way that it's like nuanced and also, in a positive way. Yeah, so it's just in a positive way. And that's just like, this tool is just something that I'm very proud of too, because I do think it's important. And we're not, because we don't have that education background, it's just important to have kind of that baseline understanding of like watch outs and what to do. How can I accurately portray this story? Yeah, so I hope I'm answering the question, but that's something.
Daily, I think that's absolutely great. And I think what it does is it really does highlight the importance of whether you're an average citizen or you're, some sort of a celebrity or a sports person or what have you, that you do have mental health needs, that there are mental health challenges. And look, I think when you assume that kind of a position of being in the public eye, I think you owe it to the public to be honest about whatever the mental health struggles, without, there are some things, of course, that you may want to keep private, some issues of abuse or sexual abuse or whatever, and you may not be ready to reveal that. That's absolutely, everyone does that in their own time, in their own space, if that's what they want to do. But, some of the other mental health struggles, that people have, especially when the public eye is on them, I think they owe it to the public, Scott. I think they owe it, Dan. They owe it, Brett. They owe it, Jean, to the public to talk about that, because they become role models. I think that's part and parcel, of that particular job. And so we as therapists, daily working with these individuals in the entertainment field, I think it's important to encourage these individuals to talk about what it is that they may be experiencing, but also talk about the empowerment strategies that they have, what it is that they utilize, what are the resources that are available that they can use. And, we need to be role models as to what's going on with us, because then we become role models to some of these individuals. Scott will tell you that I've often talked about, I have obsessive compulsive disorder. I have, hypochondriasis. I have generalized anxiety disorder. I mean, this OCD thing has made me crazy. I checked my stove about 10 times this morning to make sure that the gas was off, and then realized, damn it, it's an electric stove. So, we have to be able to look at these things, these foibles. Keep quiet, Brett. We have to look at these foibles, and be able to, talk about them, that this is what happens to us. Now, that being said, I do want to talk a little bit, just real quick, Simone Biles. I think the trolls really came after her when she was talking about her mental health struggles. Okay, a lot of people were like, well, she's not performing, she only got a bronze, blah, 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 blah. And, they didn't even realize what she has gone through, with, the abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse, all the things that she and her fellow gymnasts went through. And people didn't support her. And when another gymnast stepped up and was able to get a silver or gold or whatever the case may be, everyone was, and it was great that person did that, but it was almost like knocking her, like, well, you aren't ready. Thank God this person was. So we have to call those things out too, that when people, whether it's your regular folks on the street, whether it's a celebrity, when they go out there and they talk about that, we support them 100%.
But hold on, Scott. Hold on, Jeff. I just got to say thank you, man, because that's what it comes down to. Let's be real. Let's be honest. Every single one of us has an experience of some mental health sort or something. It's something to be ashamed of. And so if we are not seen as being honest with ourselves and to the public, how do we expect the public to be honest with us, or even to Jeff, Dr. Jeff, thank you for that, because that's one of the things that I've been saying even about my experiences of living as a suicide attempt survivor, and still today with my suicidality, it's what keeps me safe. I feel safe having my suicidal thoughts. I feel safe living with the depression that I'm living with, because it keeps me grounded, knowing of how do I make my day. So you talk about looking at that stove every 10 times. I have to check in with myself every minute, like, Brett, keep remembering, you got to stay away from that, or, you know, keep in mind that just, again, for our own, but I'm public about it. People know this about me and they know of my experiences, but that's what also gives me the respect that I have in the field, is that people say this guy has real world, like this guy is living proof and living experience of this.
So Brett, I just wanted to go back because sometimes it's your employer or your funding source or your deal that you have that you contracted. They may not want to be associated with someone of quote unquote unbalanced or whatever we want to name it. That's where I'm getting at, that because that lifeline, whether it be government or somebody said, well, you know what, now you're a risk factor. You may take funding out of it. As an athlete, you may be harmful. How do we get the funding source to accept and understand that because I'm having a mental moment, I'll just say that right now for a way of kind of phrasing it, I'm still okay. I'm still viable. Work with me through this and I will come out the other end even bigger and better for your product because you stuck with me. And a lot of times that's the, like you can see an owner of a sports program, because somebody's having a mental problem, they're gonna cut them from the team. They're wiping them off. And now this person's like, man, maybe I should have told them that because I need this financial lifeline to survive. What they did, they just compiled on top of it. That's what I'm getting at. We talk about high level participants of people, because of their need of their funding, of their backing, will cut them off if they're saying that. And like, I love that you had to say how, unfortunately, people have to find sources outside, away from their work, to get the mental health services they need. But how do we normalize it for our ones working for it, the ones who are probably causing us the trauma, as Dr. Mcrae says, that we're going through, that's putting us into this mental headspin that we're talking about now also.
It's changing, Scott. The playing field is changing. I think when Michael Phelps came out, one of the things when Michael Phelps came out, he was one of the top athletes who really got attention on this depression thing and talking about his depression in promoting talk space, and more people looking at talk space now and all that. But that was it. When Naomi Osaka came out, even though a lot of people were against her, look at some of the people who were with her, who stood with her, some of the powerful names that stood with her. You know, same thing with Simone Biles. When she came out, there were a lot of people who were against her, as Dr. Jeff was saying, but you got to look at what's happening when these high profile athletes are coming out. While there are a lot of people saying negative things, just look at the ones who are saying positive things, who are supporting. Those people are power people. So there's a shift. We've seen a big shift in how industries are now starting to have mental health days, corporations having mental health days. The sports industry is telling their players, like, look, it's okay to have a mental health day. It's okay to seek help. We're providing help, whether you want it here or not, it's okay. So the field is changing, right? And so again, if you as a person would rather live with your mental health condition just to secure more money or a status, and you're suffering with it, that's on you. But you should not sacrifice your mental health, your state of mind, for social status or money, because at the end of the day, you are dying, and it's literally going to affect you short-term and long-term. In the sports field, Scott, you could break your ankle right now and you use a contract anyway, just like that. You could have an injury. Wendy, you know, a simple injury could just take all of that away in a minute. You're gonna still have mental health issues after that injury as well as physical. So,
but that's why going as an athlete, a lot of times you're not allowed to even recognize your own injuries.
Yep.
You know, I remember that I had a concussion. I probably got a concussion in the first quarter of the game. Because of where I was playing at, I was great to be on the field playing. I couldn't tell anybody I had a concussion in the first quarter, because who knows, that might've been, actually kind of was the end of my sporting career up in Canada, but I tried to play through a concussion, for 3/4 of being concussed. I am part of the concussion study through Harvard. I get that stuff all the time still now. But so how do you even use that? You know, because listen, I was on the beginning of my career. I was only like 2 or 3 years in playing professional sports, which is nothing, and trying to hang on to that career. I think that happens to a lot of high level people also, that we feel that we can't say I'm hurt or I'm hurting.
It's changing,
will,
Scott.
Yeah,
it has changed.
Can I jump in real quick? I'm glad to be back, and it's good to have Dr. Jeff in this conversation. I heard the tail end of what Dr. Jeff said, and I listened to Brett, and before I logged off, it reminded me of something that Brett was saying before he logged off. So if I've understood this correctly, Brett, at a stage in your life, you sort of rebuilt your network. You had a lot of people that turned their back on you. And now I imagine you have some people who understand, here I am, this is what it is. So
I have a greater network now.
Yeah, you have a greater network now. Your whole authentic self, people who are able to receive your whole authentic self. If I take these two things together from what Dr. Jeff was saying, when we see the person over there, famous or not, and they're aligned with our values, whole self, Simone Biles, whatever it is, we got to speak to that. That lady's okay with me, even in the face of opposite, you know. And then what Brett is saying right now is a lot of things are changing. You know, the EAP programs, a lot of private employers, there's more openness. Jerry, Scott, myself, we've been trained with NYC Thrive as mental health first aid awareness. That wasn't happening even a few years ago. That wasn't happening. But we have to reinforce. And we talk about, you know, and I'll say this and then I'll drop out of it again. One of the great things about sustaining the barbershop conversations is we can link prior conversations to what we're talking about now. And I think Jerry will get this and others will get this. When we talked about personal transformation, community transformation, we talked about building with your tribe and building out. So if you agree, if I'm having a bad day, you're going to get that it's okay for me to say that. You may need to rebuild your tribe person by person, or as Brett is saying, suffer in silence. Some people will choose that because of the money, because of whatever it is. I'm just going to put up with this. But those are choices. Tomorrow we can decide we're going to enlist someone as part of our mental well-being team and be there for somebody as part of their mental well-being team.
Well, Mike, I want to challenge you, and I want to throw this to Dan. Dan, is it really a choice, or loneliness is sometimes it happens, or is it really a choice? Dan?
No, I think it's both. And one thing that I think got brought up earlier by Daly was that this is non-binary, and there's a life course of mental health. And so at one point you might be a little bit more lonely, or you might be sad. And that's a time to reach out or to ask somebody for help. And we've talked a lot about kind of the farther spectrum where, we have suicidal thoughts, or, we're really trapped. And there's a whole spectrum before that. And I really like focusing on the resiliency and togetherness and community. I think we need to kind of normalize this. These superstars are people. We talked about people all this time. They're superstars. And the problem is not only are we hurting our heroes up there, but because they put this giant mountain on their shoulder, but we're also putting expectations on ourselves. If we want to get to that peak, we can't let these vulnerabilities out there. We can't let it be known. And when we can't let it be known, we can't normalize it in our community. We can't have a friend or family member know that we might be vulnerable ourselves. So speaking out loud, speaking about your true life and what you're feeling is so critical. And it not only helps those around you, but it's going to help yourself too. We talked about picking therapists and shopping around for therapists. I'd say, I talk to people time and time again that are in so many relationships that are causing them a lot of damage. And they might not be ready, and hopefully they'll find their own way to get back. But you got to pick who you're around and feel supported that way and feel comfortable. And what's really critical about this meaningful interactions, with friends and family is they have the ability to read between the lines a little bit. If there's a little bit extra silence there, maybe you just ask that question, and you support each other with shared history and shared interests. All these stories I hear about people who have reached out and been stronger by those who they're surrounded by. And that, I think, is the real answer for a large portion of this. And then it's critical to know when, and it's okay to say, hey, thank you so much for sharing with me, man. I feel for you. I love you. Here's, I want to help. Tell me, what we can do. Always we and us and together, and or things that you can say, this has helped me personally, but differs all the time. But recognizing when you might not know, and that's kind of that split from resiliency to, hey, we need some extra professional help. And there's everything from therapy to medications. But I'll tell you, being a doctor myself, a medication is not going to solve your problem. It is just it gives you some reprieve to be able to set up those structures to support you. I'll leave it there, but man.
I want to build on what Dan said. I'm gonna do a horrible plug, and I want to pitch this to Daily. The horrible plug is for everyone who is listening. If I always believe one also is doing counseling, right? Your relationship dictates the range of your role, right? Like just same thing what Dan was saying. If you are close with somebody, you can catch things, you can catch signs and symptoms quicker than anyone else can. And so if you can, please go get mental health first aid. It is free for everybody. It'll help you have and navigate those awkward conversations so you can help your loved one to professional help. So that's for anyone out there listening. You can get it for free. You just have to Google mental health first aid. And now I actually want to do this quick pitch to Daily. I know earlier you said, hey, as the media dealing with creatives, one, I love being a creative, right? Myself. You said it's a great opportunity. I want to level it up. I'm going to take what Scott said. Do you feel the media not just is an opportunity, but is it a responsibility to be that transparent, one, as a creative, and two, just to show true feelings? Because one of the things that creates loneliness is that I don't believe that anyone else feels like how I feel, right? Like what Dan was saying, the stars never get to show, man, today was freaking hard, right? Or I had a low moment. And so the question is, does media have a responsibility to one, be authentic and transparent with what's of the real, what Brett was saying, the true human experience?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jerry. I was like, what are you pitching? I was going to tell you, I'll tell my people to call your people, but yes, but I think that, yes, like that's kind of part of why my team exists, the social impact team exists, is because we do feel like the entertainment media does have this responsibility to be authentic and to be nuanced and to be diverse and to do no harm in the content we're sharing. And that's why I was sharing previously about our mental health media guide. And so that is supposed to serve as a guide to help our creatives and our talent to do that, to tell their stories in ways that are responsible. And I feel like responsible is like the right word to say for this, because I do feel like because we have such this platform, we call it our superpower, our content and our reach. And so we do have this kind of responsibility to serve our audiences with this information. And so something that we like to do too. So like not every episode or every show is gonna show talent talking to their therapist or talent, talking about something that they're going through, maybe like a mental health challenge. But something that we like to do is to equip our audiences with resources so that they can learn more. So maybe that's connecting them with nonprofits that we work with, or connecting them to the hotlines, any type of resources like that. That's also something that we like to do. But yes, long story short, it is our responsibility, and that is what we are working towards. And we have several commitments like specific for mental health, and that is what we're doing.
Can I piggyback on something Dan said, just because it hadn't come up till you said it, Dan, which is medication. And this is part of what I do as well. And I want to echo that it doesn't solve problems, but also provide hope that, like, when you're acutely symptomatic, medications can be really useful. I try to use the analogy. It's like if you go to work and you have a horrible boss and you're just like you have a headache all day from this stressful situation, an incredibly painful headache. It's hard to do your work. You're snapping at people. The medicine, it's like taking Advil. It's gonna make that headache go away so you can do the hard work of your day and the hard work of navigating your emotions. So it's like turning the volume down on very intense, uncomfortable, distracting emotions. And there's different types. And of course, you want to find someone who will talk you through the different types. But it's another resource. It's another resource that doesn't have to be forever. It can be temporary. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Jenny.
I
was gonna come to you, Michael. I wanted to know your thoughts on any kind of policy.
Since we're doing plugs here, I just thought I wanted to plug kind of the NYC Well again, right? I mean, that's the city's free confidential mental health support line. You can call, text, or chat. It's over 200 languages. You can speak to someone right there on the spot, or they can connect you to a service or a provider that that could help you out. So I just want to really kind of really promote that as a really great tool that we have access to here in the city.
Can I just add to the NYC Well, is they have a website too, and we actually just added a new tag called loneliness, or if you put in different terms like loneliness, it'll come up with programs that are focused on community and resilience that way. So great resource.
So I know we're running out of time, and before we end, I feel personally that I need some closure on this conversation, especially around loneliness. So can we talk for a minute about those who are watching or listening, if they're feeling lonely right now, whether they're lonely by themselves, lonely in a marriage or intimate relationship? What can we give? What tools, what recommendations can we give to address that? Because we touched on some very heavy things. I feel triggered. Thank God I'm able to regulate my emotions and my resilience, but I can't imagine for those who are listening now and say, yo, this was a very heavy conversation. Can we provide some closure and really about the resilience? And also just to say, resilience sometimes is knowing when to walk away. It's to realize that this is not a fight you can win. So don't even try to fight. Just be humble yourself, whether you want to humble yourself to get help or humble yourself to just sit your ass down and just know that you can't win this fight. Yeah, that's resilience too. There's strength in vulnerability, especially talking to us as men. There is strength in vulnerability. Stop acting like you're strong. Stop acting like you're all that man. Stop acting. I'm not just talking to us on here. I'm saying to those who are watching, because I do a lot of work around suicide, murder, suicide, and I'm seeing too many males killing too many females. There's a new trend now of just a whole lot of murdering of women. And we really need to talk to our men out here to really control those emotions, learn to walk away as a part of your resiliency. You don't own women. You don't own these women out here. You don't own their lives. So learning to walk away and stop killing off our queens.
So with that said, Brett, I know you're in the barbershop and you are right on point. We are running out of time. And Jeannie, I know that you have to go because you have nothing. So Jeannie, I'm going to let you start us off with final say. And once again, touching back on Brett, what can we give people who watch this show some type of jewel that will help them to stay resilient as they go through these days and times that they're living through? So Jeannie, I'm gonna let you go first.
What I was thinking about when Brett was talking about what can we give and I'm picturing someone, sitting and feeling so alone and doesn't know how long they can take it is like, I don't know if anyone's ever broken a bone or had a really difficult medical issue. It's crazy how long the body can take to heal. Like you think, are you kidding? Like this is like the 6th month and I'm not, but those of us who've done it, it actually does heal. So I think just if I were to give anything, obviously, in addition to like the resources that are tangible that people could hold on to, it's that it feels like it's not going to get better, and yet the body is an amazing thing, and this resilience is built into us. And did I have another thought? I guess that would be the last message I would give. Yeah. Oh, and the other thing I was going to say is it's a little bit like if you've had sometimes people are in their first crisis episode, and that's the hardest one, because actually once you're through it, you're so much stronger. Next time you have a panic attack, you're like, oh, that's a panic attack. And I did this and I did that. Or, you felt suicidal. Oh my God, I remember like coming out of that. And so I can do X, Y, and Z. So like, that's another thing to just recognize is how you come out stronger and more knowledgeable. Yeah.
Dr. Mcrae?
So no, I think for me, I mean, all this has been a great conversation. I think one of the things that I think has really resonated for me, again, and I do this in my own work, is just the importance of connecting with people and being connected, however that looks, and really strengthening your connections. Oftentimes I find that we think that we don't have connections when sometimes we really do. We just haven't necessarily sought those out, or they haven't come to us. But I've realized even in my own situations that when I realized when I thought I didn't have people, I actually had a lot more people but I had to reach out. So I think it's about being proactive and reaching out to people and connecting, particularly in these kind of difficult days, of COVID, where we've had to kind of isolate and be away from other people.
Thank you. Daly, you're up next.
Yes, hello. I think an important takeaway is that there's not a one size fits all answer, and that there are several different tools that we can all use to stay mentally resilient. There's therapy, there's meditation, going on daily walks. And I think, I'm going to lean on our mental health experts here, to provide more insights on that. But ultimately, finding what combination of tools work for us is important as we, move along this mental health continuum.
Wendy?
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for this wonderful conversation. And I would say, coming from a coach's perspective, and what we've learned in sports, especially recently, is that you just have to stop. I mean, people that are really high stress, for high athletes, is like, go, go, go. But what makes a difference, and what Simone did, is she just did not go. Naomi did not do it. I have to say, my coaches, when COVID hit, and all of the kids had to go online and we had team athletes, the thing that I'm most proud of is they all sat on Zoom and they just talked to the kids. It wasn't about exercising. They let them express themselves. I was just so proud that these coaches that are still relatively young knew that the kids just needed to calm down and talk. Sometimes you just have to take a moment and be there for someone, for sure. And I think people need to understand, to motivate someone to do something, you have to understand how they think, right? And you have to take the time to listen to people, and you get that from taking a moment and to be there for someone. So I appreciate what you all are doing.
Dan? Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's echoing a lot of what's already been said, and it's just been such a great conversation. I think, to me, the first thing is to really normalize this. We've said it a number of times. This is an incredibly common, this is a large spectrum of things that we're talking about, but it's very, very common. And so just know that you're not alone in those experiences, that those experiences are real. They're human, they're natural. And then the other thing is to, I would say, stay connected, and not just staying in touch, but really in a meaningful way. Make sure you have that follow-up and reaching out and listening. So it's a life course, as we said, and sometimes you might be doing better, sometimes you might be doing worse, but no matter what it is, reaching out to people that you feel comfortable with is going to help you, and it's going to help them. A lot of my patients, I talk to them, and I talk if they're interested in volunteering, and they're like, I'm busy with all these other things. I was like, yeah, but I bet you'll find some meaning in that. And the ones who do end up really finding a lot of joy in that, and have a lot of positive consequences. So you're not alone. Stay connected, and reach out and listen to each other.
Brother Scudder?
I'm just happy that I was here. Thank you all for all that you do. Thank you for making this a meaningful conversation. As I said, being here representing the real experience of someone living with it and people listening. There's one thing I've learned that I'd like to share is emotional pain is one breath at a time. It's not one day at a time. It's not this whole idea, it's a one breath at a time. Every breath you take is pain. So I say to you, you are not alone unless you want to be alone, meaning that there are support, there are people, there are things out here that can help. But if you choose to stay alone in your suffering and your pain, don't say that there aren't. Don't say you didn't learn something from this today or learn of a resource today. You are making that choice for yourself of how you want to be. There are people like you who are going through this experience, and we're good. We're doing well. That doesn't mean we're not experiencing things, but it means that we're good at experiencing what we're experiencing and staying resilient in that. So thank you.
Dr. Gardia?
I know we're very short on time. Bravo to all my colleagues and their great comments. And Mike, so great to see you. I would say, just echoing what everyone said, it's important that you take that time when you are by yourself, not necessarily alone. Sometimes we're alone, but when you're by yourself, to really examine, take the time and see how you can recreate yourself, what's really going on, assessing, have that faith, that positivity. And for those who are older, the importance of exercising just for general health, but especially when there's a depression or anxiety. I'm not talking about the athletes, Wendy. I'm just talking about, for the regular folks, that just changes the dopamine and all the other neurotransmitters and hormones. So the importance of exercise, faith, and as Sigmund Freud once said, when you're going through hell, keep on going. He didn't really say that, but you get the point.
Wow, what another awesome barbershop. Mike, any last words? I'm gonna let Jerry sign us off. So
Yes.
I'm backing up. This is Jerry's.
Yeah, I'll go and then I'll kick it over to Jerry. A lot of gems. I'm sorry I missed a little in the middle, but that's why we archive these discussions. I'm going to listen to the part that I missed. I invite people to go back and listen to the prior discussions. A couple of things that I'm left with. The resources have been said throughout the session. NYC Thrive has been said. NYC Well has been said. Various websites have been mentioned during the broadcast. Resource list is going to be posted again. And I invite everyone to check those out. And don't be afraid or embarrassed to check those out. Check those out just because steel sharpens steel, and you might need to tell somebody else, even if you don't think you need those resources today. And another thing that I'm struck by is how connected the mind and the body are, and how there's an opportunity for each of us to treat our mind and body in similar ways. So when people talk about physical exercise, Dr. Jeff just hit it on right now. There's a connection right now. You attend to your physical well-being, and it has a payoff to your emotional and your mental well-being. But the thing that I got from today is we can have casual conversation with people in our peer group about things like diet and exercise, and there's no stigma around that. Well, look, we started the barbershop because there was this thing called the pandemic, right? And we started quarantining, and life was disrupted, and there's been so much loss, and there's been so much pain. And one of the things I think we've talked about is if some good things come out of this shared experience, we know it's okay to say, I'm not okay sometimes. So that's something we can normalize. I feel like we've heard that before, and I feel like we've heard it again this evening. If you need to tap out for a minute, do that. If you need to sort of rebuild some of the dynamics of your relationships, do that. If you need to create a new friend, do that. And with this distinction we got about therapy, if you need to talk to somebody just for a minute to regroup and figure out which friends can I trust, can't I trust, which friends am I leaving or whatever, there are people whose job and mission it is to have that kind of coaching conversation the same way diet, physical exercise, whatever a coach would want to work on someone who's trying to advance their physical body. It's very, very powerful. And I appreciate everyone for joining the conversation, everyone who is listening on the conversation. I'm gonna kick it over to Jerry.
Hold up, before Jerry, so Jerry's gonna have the last word, wrapping it up, and we're out of here. I just want to tell a couple of tidbits, because Jerry's gonna get the final word, because this is his work. So I just want to remind everybody, next month is Domestic Violence Month. We're going to be back on, and we're going to be talking about domestic violence. I also want to give a big hooray to those who are celebrating Spanish Heritage Month this month. Yay! We love our people and our folks. We want to have a shout out to them. And once again, thank you to all of our guests. And Dr. Garcia, maybe I'll see you on another flight when I go to Atlanta. It's like when I go to Atlanta, I see you on a flight somewhere. so actually, I'm going next month. So I may see you next month on the plane. But I'm going to turn it over to Jerry. This is his work. This is what he does. So Jerry, take it home.
I appreciate you, Scott. And again, a big shout out, echoing out all of our amazing panelists. Thank you all for helping us remember not to underestimate our resiliency. We talked about so many great things. And one of the areas I kind of want to lead off with what Brett said. Basically, if I were to speak to you right now, and for all of those who, just so you understand some of your risk factors, whether you are finding yourself isolating or being withdrawn, change of behaviors. And this is also for family members or people are close to someone who you're seeing going through different bad, just behavioral changes, right? Don't underestimate your resiliency. Don't be afraid to have that conversation. Reach out to those who are close to you so you can find that fit to build the resources and support group around you. Please know that there is no health without mental health. And the truth be told, right, you can't take care of someone if you're not good yourself. A quick story, we had someone maybe 2 weeks ago within the agency shoot out an email, say, hey, I'm going through a suicidal situation. I cannot do this. And the person they reached out to tried to call EAP and something happened with the call. And they reached out to myself and I pulled in Brett. And in that time, within 2 hours, that person was able to find hope, has been good since. And all I have to say, we were able to connect, find belonging, and then give out help. Please know that the only way you get through coverage is to rumble past vulnerability. That's a great quote from Brene Brown. So we want to thank you again to make sure that you don't underestimate your resiliency. A shout out again to all of our panelists. And for all those who are listening, please reach out to any of the help resources that we put out there. Thank you so much for listening and know that you still belong. I give it right back to Scott to end us off. Thank you. Signing out.
Thank you. And we want to ask, we're going to sign off now. We want to ask all our panelists just to hang on for a second as we close out the YouTube channel. So thank you and good night until next month.